Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest has often been described as one of India's most distinguished bureaucrats, but he's been much more, a prominent figure in public life. He was Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, worked closely with Mr. Narasimha Rao. He was High Commissioner of India to the United Kingdom. He's been governor for more than 10 years, Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra, and has most recently been in the news for the publication of his new book, Through the Corridors of Power. I'm delighted to welcome Mr. P.C. Alexander.
Thank you.
Through the Corridors of Power. You have been more than through the corridors of power. You have been power in so many ways, in so many senses for a very long time. Why do you call the book Through the Corridors of Power?
Well, I was not the principal. I walked through the corridors, sometimes participated in what one may now call power, exercise of power, but the principal was always somebody else. So I thought it was better to call it, first I thought of calling it a witness to history, then I thought it would be better to call it Through the Corridors of Power.
Reading your book, particularly the times that you worked with the prime ministers, there is an enormous sense of power, and I think a recent reviewer has talked about how it is, how the book suggests that it is really bureaucrats who exercise power in whatever situations they are. So, what is the exercise of power that you really had?
It depends on the trust the principal has in you, and the degree of power that he or she allows you to exercise. If you do not have full confidence or if you have not earned full trust of your principal, Prime Minister or whoever is your principal, then the extent of power that you may be seen to be exercising will also be much less. I should say that if I have moved in that circle of high voltage power, it is largely because of the confidence and trust which Mrs. Gandhi placed in me within about 3 months of my joining her office. I was a stranger to her when I joined her office. I cannot claim to have known her well. I never had an opportunity of even a long talk with her. But after my selection by her for this post, I think she watched me very cleverly and carefully over a period of 2-3 months. I could see that she was.
So what were the qualities in you that you think she found able to evoke trust?
I think, I'm not claiming too much, I hope. I think she found me to be a very honest man. Personal integrity was very strong in my character as a young officer from my younger days. And probably she also felt that I was a man of integrity. In other words, I will not use the position I was having in my career for anything that would be considered personal or beneficial to my circle of friends or individuals who are close to me.
It's also interesting that your book has you've put down some of the sort of handwritten notes that you and Mrs. Gandhi exchanged in the middle of meetings, and I also found interesting that some of them have little doodles. Are they yours or hers?
Yes, I am incapable of drawing doodles. That is her style of working. I wonder whether you know her personally or knew her personally. You are too young to know her. This is 20 years now. She had a very different style of functioning. She was capable of carrying on work in her own mind while following intelligently what was going round the table in a committee or anything like that. And between me and her, instead of calling me to her side and whispering something which will distract others also, she had this habit. She always had this pad, scribble something and give it to me, and I return it immediately. And even when I am in the office, instead of picking up the phone and talking to me, she would send a slip of paper in double sealed cover if it is top secret. In her presence it will be sealed and double sealed, and then it will be delivered here, and then man will wait there to carry it back. So I also had to go do that, write my views on the back of that and then send it back.
You know, you have in your book written about your personal experiences through a long and distinguished career. What has prompted this? Is it sort of an obligation to history, or you felt that there were aspects of what had happened in your life and in your career and what you had witnessed that needed explanation, that needed clarification?
I belong to a generation which was born and brought up in the colonial years. My younger days as a college student and even in the university as a teacher before the IAS was started and all that. That was during the colonial period, the war years at that time, not even the transition period. So my generation saw the colonial era and the transition to the new era, and in my case I lived through the new era, occupying some positions in government. That is, then I was in a native state, Travancore, during my school and college years, my first degree, MA, and younger years, in a princely state. That was a world by itself, very different from the rest of India. There again, I was a witness to a transition. And then I joined the civil service, Indian Administrative Service, IAS, just after independence. And when we all joined, we were having the same type of training which the British officers had, and we were in a milieu which had not really changed. It was still the colonial administration, very much British colonial administration. So I joined at the time when transition from colonial administration to what we now call development administration took place. And there I was not only a witness, I was a participant.
But isn't there in recording this narrative, which has invaluable value for history from an active player, but how did you engage with the temptation to not look at it as a defense of yourself, that feel obliged to just make yourself look good in what was really a process of recording history? So how does one balance that?
Now, I mentioned those 2 or 3 factors which prompted me to think that I am a qualified person to write about this, and very few people of my generation are left, and those who are left have no inclination or interest in writing. Then the 4th factor was that luck or fate or God's grace, whatever you may call it, brought me into positions not normally within the reach of a bureaucrat. I was a governor for 12 years in 2 major states of India. I was High Commissioner in London, which was not normally given to IAS officers. I worked with 2 or 3 prime ministers, again not a normal job. I was in international civil service, and there also I happened to become ultimately the head of the organization there. So I thought that there is something that I have achieved. Maybe I should give an account of this part of my life as a source of, I would not call it inspiration, but as a source of reference at least to the younger generation. And that was another motivation.
But in the sense that, the recording of history, even by an active player, is never sort of completely an impartial, empirical fact. There are the prisms of one's experience, of the self-image that we need, all of us, have the need to project. So what is the image of yourself that you hope will emerge from the book, or that you have of yourself?
I think it's for others to decide whether I have been successful in resisting the temptation of self-defense or self-glorification, as some people would call,
Or just self-explanation?
or self-explanation. I don't know whether I have succeeded. I have tried to be objective as far as possible, but mine has not been a bed of roses as outside-ish thing it was, my career. I had my own reverses in life, in my official life.
You were talking about the fact that your life hadn't always been a bed of roses, and I guess that few lives are. But which were some of the most thorny times? Most recently, of course, has been the issue of the presidency, and you're seen by a lot of people as the man who almost was president. Was that the most difficult personal time for you?
I will not say that. That was a very difficult time for me for two reasons. And certainly the fact that I missed getting this office has left a scar on my mind. But to be very honest, much more than that was the fact that some people carried on a personal campaign of vilification against me, to discredit me, particularly in the eyes of the then government. In an attempt to discredit my reputation, they went to the worst tricks of personal vilification, and it pained me immensely.
So was this a sense of personal hurt or disappointment that you're not President of India today?
It is a matter of personal disappointment to me that having reached that far, I couldn't get it. It is there. But this factor rankled in my mind for a long time, and it still rankles.
There is a popular sort of perception that to be in politics, you need a very thick skin.
I know, I am learning it.
What does it take to be a bureaucrat?
Well, today's bureaucrats have more problems than I have. But I should also, before I come to that, I should complete that my explanation to the first question, which were the moments in my life where I felt very bad or sad. That is the Morarji Desai episode.
When you were Commerce Secretary?
When I was Commerce Secretary. What worried me then was I was being penalized for standing up for personal honesty. It was the issue of a very high value license at that time. At that time, it was 4.5 crores, which is about 45 crores today. It was a very high value license. And I stood firmly against all attempts to get that license through various offices, but I stood firmly. And I even asked the question to me, is there somebody upstairs? If there is somebody upstairs, will he allow these things to happen? Because what I have done, I have not done anything wrong which in his eyes. But why I was thrown out of the job, I have said it in my book. That was what is called Dharma Sangadam. In Sanskrit, you calculate. It's a dilemma of something connected with Dharma Sangadam. I went through that phase for which I could not get an explanation. Till a few years later, where I found everything was for the good. So these were the occasions in my life where I really developed a bit of cynicism, a good deal of disappointment, anger, annoyance, and a lot of sadness.
But what was then the pinnacle, the high point, the great moment, when you were approached, and you felt that the announcement of your candidature as president was only a few hours away? Would you say that was the moment of your greatest satisfaction so far, only to be yanked away?
No, when the Prime Minister telephoned me, that is Atal Bihari Vajpayee at that time, telephoned me saying, congratulating me and saying that we have just decided to make the announcement tomorrow, I took it very coolly, in fact, because I never thought it would be otherwise. Ever since I was told that ever since I was asked whether I would be a candidate, that to be exact date I can say, I can never forget that, 30th November 2001, long before the elections. From that date onwards, I had imagined myself that everything will be smooth and I am going to get it. Actually, I told Pramod Mahajan, who came to me with this message from the from Advani and Atalji, whether I will agree to be. I said, what a question! It's a matter of great pride. It's a great honor to me. What is the question of my agreeing? But I continued with that impression that eventually it will be smooth. And when he telephoned me, I thought it will be announced the next day, and then within a few days I will be back in Delhi in a new position. So it was not that great excitement at that time. Of course, when the telephone call came, my children were all with me. They had come expecting this from different corners of the world and the country. They had come, and my wife, we were all together.
And what was the reaction when the phone call came to say that it wasn't on?
Very funny to say it now. At that moment, I was not dispirited, dejected, or driven to the dumps. When Mahajan, the same man, came to say, sir, it cannot work now because of these reasons, and PM feels very unhappy, Advani feels very unhappy, they don't know how to say this to you and all those things. Some courage in me, or some feeling in me that, okay, it has come, it was not your seeking, it came without your seeking, it goes away without your knowledge, it goes away. That was a sort of an attitude of mind. I don't know how I behaved, but to be very frank, within a week, I really felt very, very unhappy. I wanted to resign and go away. I felt I can't continue as governor in Maharashtra, where I had done 9.5 years already, and I had another 10.5 to go.
It is the first chapter in your book, which you would ordinarily expect to be chronological. Is it because, was this the reason why you felt that the book has been written? It's the very first chapter, and it's what its emphasis. Is this for you a context for you to be able to tell your story?
It was because people would expect to know why, having had such a career behind me, I chose to come away to a membership to be a member of the Rajya Sabha. In fact, many people were surprised that I had chosen to be a member of the Rajya Sabha.
Do you see this as a step down in some ways?
Not that way. It is totally different. I have been a civil servant ever since independence. Almost in the beginning of independence, I was a bureaucrat, going from one job to a better job to a still better job, like that. Suddenly to take up a political type of assignment.
Wouldn't governorship be political appointee? Wouldn't
governorship is
in some ways High Commissioner too? Is it?
No, these are not political in that sense. But to be a legislator, to be a member of the Rajya Sabha, is political. So that was a big change. And why did I have to do this? That question was in everybody's mind, and I thought I should explain. And also I thought the public have a right to know what happened actually. There were various versions about it, and some people cannot understand why I missed it, or why certain parties and personalities took a stand so firmly against me. What have I done to deserve it? And I thought I should explain the story as I know. And I wanted to be very faithful in that account. So that's why I've given date, time, conversations, telephone calls, everything.
You're obviously maintaining a record of this process.
I maintained a diary, a good diary, from the time I became secretary in the Commerce Ministry. And that is why I could narrate the story I had of that license issue. And when I joined the UN, I didn't write much, but when I joined Indiraji as Principal Secretary, from day one, I wrote a diary. I started writing a diary. It is really not a diary which I dictated to anybody, to my peers. It's my own diary. You can say it is Alexander's shorthand diary, because I wrote things in a way which I alone can really understand what I am writing about.
you sort of, as a bureaucrat, you're trained to make notings, you make notings for yourself, or also as a bureaucrat, you're ostensibly at least trained to be politically neutral because you have to serve different masters. But when it comes to the presidency, you had been very close to the Congress, and here was really the initiative being taken by the BJP. And there were the riots in Gujarat, and there was a whole ideological circumscribing of the people who were supporting you. Did that pose any difficulties for you, or how did you relate to that dimension of this process?
Well, it may be too much of a claim, but I have to make it with all sincerity. Whatever position I have held, I have tried to be very objective and very impartial. And particularly in Maharashtra, when I have to deal with the Congress on the one side and the BJP and the Shiv Sena on the other side, I deliberately made efforts to remain totally impartial. Whatever may be my personal predilections or convictions, I put them aside, and I was very fair and correct to both sides. And I have that confidence that if I became president, I will not run into a situation where anybody will say that he has obliged this or he has been partial to that.
That, in a sense, is the obligation of the office. But personally, Dr. P.C. Alexander, in some ways, sort of belonging to a minority community, and here with the Gujarat riots, and here was a government that was perceived to be hostile to the minorities, and yet they were providing you support and proposing your candidature for the highest office in the land. Was that a sense of conflict or discomfiture in some ways?
No, there was nothing surprising in it. Every time it is the duty of the ruling government and the ruling party to propose the candidate for the president. That is the convention. There is no doubt about it that from day one, this is parliamentary democracy. They have to propose the name first. They have to take the initiative first. And they did it as part of their responsibility. When it was suggested to me that when they asked me, when Pramod Mahajan asked me whether I would be accepting, whether I would be happy to accept it, within a minute I told him, I'll be happier if your party gets the support of the Congress, and not only the Congress, even the left parties and all the major segments of the opposition.
But you would be only happier, but it wasn't a condition.
It is not a condition.
Would you have been willing to participate in an election for president?
I told them.
Where you were nominated by the BJP and had been opposed.
I told him very clearly, it is in my book also. I said I will not be able to canvass support for my position if a contest becomes necessary. Please don't ask me to approach anybody asking for vote for me. Then he stopped me in the sentence, that question will not arise. You will be elected unopposed. We expect the Congress to support you. In fact, they will support you more enthusiastically than we have supported you. So between us, we have 82% of the votes, and therefore no other party will support. If for any chance a contest becomes necessary, we will never ask you to campaign for yourself. You will that part of the work will be ours. Because I talked about that first.
Dr. Alexander, one of the aspects that emerge greatly in your book and in the conversation too is that your very strong commitment to your sense of integrity and honesty. And you've also mentioned that you had hoped that the book will be an inspiration to new generations of bureaucrats.
An encouragement, you can say, because inspiration is too difficult.
Dr. Alexander, how important is faith for you? You just quoted from the Sanskrit scriptures a short while ago. You have talked about, implicitly at least, a sense of destiny. How important is faith for you, and what is your faith? I don't mean just the formal structures of faith.
Well, Christianity is my faith, and I am a strong believer in the fact that Jesus' life is a good model for a young man or an old man or a poor man or a rich man. So I have no doubt about it in my conscience. When I was in a moral dilemma about this Maraji business, finding no answer to this question, a very intelligent and highly educated bishop of my church, he had a doctorate from Princeton and from Cambridge, very intelligent and very highly educated man, Bishop Paulus Mark Gregorios, the name is very well known. He came to me and told me, addressing me with my pet name, and said, don't have the arrogance to think that God owes an explanation to you. On the other hand, if you have the humility to, through prayers, to know His mind, He may let you know, not immediately, but over a period of time. And this is exactly what happened.
So has God let you know yet what happened in the presidential election?
Well, I take it in with that philosophy that it was probably not His will, or probably He didn't think that it is necessary in my career. After all, He had given me everything else. Why should I be a president also? I have accepted it philosophically with that. I have that much faith in God, and that is my philosophy also. Otherwise, life would be very unpleasant.
Dr. Alice Engler, thank you very much. This has been a great privilege. Thank you.